Christmas doesn't always arrive wrapped in red ribbons and gold paper. Sometimes it comes dressed in grief. Sometimes it whispers through empty rooms where laughter used to live. Sometimes it sits heavy on your chest at 3 a.m., reminding you of every person who should be at your table but isn't. Sometimes Christmas doesn't feel like magic at all, it feels like a betrayal. For Emily Gamble, Christmas was the thief that stole everything. Her mother's last breath happened on a snowy January morning, but the countdown started on Christmas Day, the day her heart was shattered by the man she thought would stay forever. That Christmas, while families gathered around glowing trees and children tore through wrapping paper with squeals of delight, Emily sat beside a hospital bed, holding her mother's frail hand, wondering how joy and devastation could exist in the same season. And for Josh Callaway, Christmas became the mirror that showed him exactly who he'd become, and who he'd betrayed. The boy who promised his mother he'd always come home had turned into the man who sent flowers instead of showing up. The son who once believed family was everything had traded presents for profit, warmth for wealth, connection for conference calls. Until one winter night, when his mother's heart gave out and his world stopped spinning. But here's what I know about Christmas, about loss, about love that seems impossible. Fate doesn't forget. It waits. It circles back when the time is right, when hearts are ready, when two people who were once everything to each other find themselves standing in the same city, breathing the same cold December air, carrying the same wounds. This is not a simple love story. This is about second chances that don't announce themselves with trumpets. This is about grief that teaches you how to love deeper. This is about a season that can break you into 1,000 pieces, and then, if you're brave enough, if you're open enough, put you back together in a way that makes you whole for the first time. So before we begin this journey, I want you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel, because stories like this, stories that dig into the messy, beautiful truth of being human, are what we're all about here. Get comfortable. Maybe grab some tea, light a candle, let yourself feel whatever comes up. And when we reach the end, I want you to share something with me in the comments. What's your most unforgettable Christmas memory? The one that changed you. The one you carry in your pocket like a stone or a jewel. I'll read every single one. Now settle in. Let me tell you about Josh Callaway and Emily Gamble, about the Christmas that almost destroyed them, and the Christmas that saved them both. Josh Callaway's first memory of Christmas was the smell of cinnamon rolls his mother couldn't afford. Helen Callaway worked the early shift at the diner on Dorchester Avenue, the kind of place where truckers and insomniacs came for coffee so strong it could wake the dead. She'd come home at 2 p.m. with grease under her fingernails and exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes, and Josh, 6 years old, 7, 8, would be waiting at the kitchen table with his homework spread out like a tiny empire. Their apartment in South Boston was a third-floor walk-up where the radiator clanked like something was dying inside it and the windows rattled when the wind picked up. In winter they could see their breath indoors until Helen got the space heater going. The walls were thin enough that Josh learned to fall asleep to the sound of the Finnegans fighting next door, Mr. Finnegan's slurred shouts followed by Mrs. Finnegan's weeping. But inside apartment 3C, there was warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Helen Callaway was a small woman, barely 5'3", but she carried herself like she was 10 feet tall. She had dark eyes that could make you confess your sins with a single look, and hands that were always in motion, cooking, cleaning, fixing Josh's collar before school, braiding a neighbor girl's hair, writing encouraging notes that she'd slip into Josh's lunchbox. "You are capable of extraordinary things," one note said. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Josh kept every single one. His father had left when Josh was 3, just walked out one Tuesday morning for cigarettes and never came back. Helen never spoke about him except once, when Josh asked why other kids had dads and he didn't. "Some people aren't built for staying," she'd said, her voice soft but firm. "That's not about you, baby. That's about them. You are not less because someone chose to be absent. You are more because you survived it." Helen worked 2 jobs most of Josh's childhood, the diner during the day, cleaning offices at night. Josh would do his homework in those empty corporate buildings after hours, the fluorescent lights humming overhead while his mother pushed a vacuum cleaner back and forth, back and forth. He'd watch her move through those spaces where during the day men in expensive suits made decisions that shaped the world, and he'd think, one day I'm going to be in an office like this. Not cleaning it, running it. He never told her that dream out loud. He was afraid it was too big. But Helen knew. Mothers always know. She noticed the way Josh studied, with an intensity that seemed too fierce for a child. She saw how he'd check books out from the library about business, about investing, about men who'd built empires from nothing. And instead of telling him to play more, to be a kid, she encouraged it. "You've got something special in you," she'd say, sitting beside him at the wobbly kitchen table after midnight. both of them exhausted. "I can feel it. You're going to do something that matters, Josh. You're going to change our lives." Christmas in the Callaway household was modest but magical. Helen had a tradition. Every Christmas Eve she'd make hot chocolate from scratch, the real kind with melted chocolate and whole milk and a pinch of cinnamon, and they'd sit together on the sagging couch and read. Not watch TV, read. She'd started this when Josh was 4, reading to him from picture books. As he got older, he'd read to her, first from chapter books, then novels, then whatever he was obsessed with at the moment. One year it was Dickens. Another year, biographies of entrepreneurs. It didn't matter what they read. What mattered was the ritual, the closeness, the way the world outside disappeared and it was just the two of them in the story. "This is what wealth is," Helen told him once, when Josh was 14 and acutely aware of how little they had. "Not money this time, attention, love. Remember that." Josh did well in school, not because he was naturally brilliant though he was smart but because he was relentless. He studied while other kids played basketball. He worked tutoring jobs while other kids went to parties. He applied to every scholarship he could find, wrote essays until his hand cramped, stayed after class to ask teachers questions until they started avoiding him in the hallways. When the acceptance letter from Boston University arrived, Helen cried. Not the quiet tears of pride, but the ugly, gasping sobs of a woman who'd spent 18 years hoping and praying and sacrificing for a moment exactly like this. Josh held her while she wept and he made a promise, the first promise he'd later break. "I'm going to take care of you, Mom," he whispered into her hair. "Everything you've done for me, I'm going to pay it back 1,000 times over." College was brutal in a different way than poverty had been. Josh worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load. He slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen and black coffee, and still managed to graduate summa cum laude with a degree in finance. The pressure was crushing, but he'd learned how to carry crushing weight. Helen had trained him for this. She came to his graduation in a dress she'd bought from a thrift store and altered herself, beaming like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. They took exactly 3 photos, they couldn't afford more prints, and in every one Helen's hand is on Josh's arm, holding on like she's afraid to let go. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "Whatever happens next, remember, you've already succeeded. You became the man I knew you could be." But Josh wasn't satisfied with success. He wanted more. He wanted the kind of wealth that would mean his mother never had to work another day. The kind of security that would erase every hard year she'd lived through. So when the offer came from a prestigious investment firm in Los Angeles, 6-figure starting salary, partnership track, the whole seductive package, Josh said yes without hesitation. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he'd come home all the time. He told himself he was doing this for her. But the road to breaking promises is always paved with good intentions. Los Angeles hit Josh Callaway like a religion he didn't know he was converting to. The firm that hired him, Hartwell and Associates, occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Century City, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art that cost more than his mother's annual salary. On his first day, Josh stood in the lobby at 6:30 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the city gold, and felt something he'd never felt before, possibility without limits. Everyone here seemed to operate at a frequency he was only beginning to tune into. They spoke in rapid-fire shorthand about markets and margins, they worked through lunch, they took calls at midnight without complaint. The energy was electric, addictive, dangerous. His first Christmas in LA, Josh flew home to Boston. Helen had the apartment decorated, their tiny, artificial tree with its mismatched ornaments, stockings hung over the radiator because they didn't have a fireplace, the smell of her famous cinnamon rolls filling every corner. They spent 3 days reading, talking, laughing at inside jokes nobody else would understand. "Tell me everything," Helen said, sitting on the couch with her feet tucked under her, looking younger than she had in years. "Tell me about California." Josh told her about the work, about the clients, about the adrenaline rush of closing a deal. He didn't tell her about the loneliness. He didn't tell her how sometimes he'd sit in his expensive apartment overlooking the city and feel like he was disappearing. "I'm proud of you," Helen said, squeezing his hand. "But don't forget to live, Josh. Don't forget there's more to life than winning." "I know, Mom." But he didn't know. Not really. The second year was harder to get away. Josh was managing his own accounts now, working on a massive deal that couldn't wait. He promised Helen he'd come home for Christmas, booked the flight, put it on his calendar. But 3 days before Christmas the deal started falling apart. The client was panicking, threatening to walk, and if Josh lost this account, it wouldn't just be a professional failure, it would be a statement about whether he belonged in this world at all. So he made the call. "Mom, I'm so sorry." The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds, but it felt like 3 hours. "It's okay, sweetheart," Helen finally said, her voice small. "You do what you need to do. We'll celebrate when you have time." "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby." Josh told himself he'd make it up to her. He told himself next year would be different. He told himself the sacrifice was worth it because he was building something that would take care of her forever. The deal closed on December 27th. Josh made $400,000 in commission. He sent his mother flowers and a check for $10,000. But he didn't call until New Year's Eve, and when he did, Helen's voice sounded different. Distant. Like she was speaking to him from across a chasm that was slowly widening. The third Christmas, Josh didn't even book a flight. The fourth Christmas, he sent gifts but forgot to call until December 28th. By the fifth Christmas, Helen stopped asking when he was coming home. Josh told himself this was temporary. He told himself that once he made partner, once he hit a certain number in his bank account, once he'd built enough security, he'd slow down. He'd go home. He'd be the son he used to be. But success is a treadmill that only goes faster. He made partner at 32, youngest in the firm's history. He bought a house in the Hollywood Hills with a view that made visitors gasp. He dated beautiful women who liked expensive restaurants and never asked him about his childhood. He worked 16-hour days and convinced himself he was happy because his bank account said he was winning. Every few months he'd call his mother. The conversations grew shorter, more superficial. "How's the weather? How's your health?" "I'm good, busy making moves. I'll visit soon. I promise." Promises that evaporated like morning fog. Josh's colleagues envied him. He was the golden boy, the success story, the guy who'd come from nothing and built everything. But late at night, alone in his big empty house, Josh would sometimes think about that tiny apartment in South Boston, about reading on the couch with his mother, about hot chocolate and cinnamon rolls and the feeling of being known. And he'd feel a hollowness so profound it made his chest ache. But the next morning he'd push it down and get back to work. Because work was the thing that made sense. Work had rules. Work rewarded effort. Work didn't require emotional availability or vulnerability or any of the messy, complicated things relationships demanded. Until November 15th. Josh was in a meeting when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. During a break he checked his messages. 11 missed calls from a Boston number he didn't recognize. His blood went cold. He stepped into the hallway and called back. "Mr. Callaway? This is Boston General Hospital. Your mother, Helen Callaway, was brought in about an hour ago. She collapsed at work. You need to come now." The flight from LAX to Boston took 5 hours. It felt like 5 years. Josh sat in first class, staring out the window at the darkness below, and all he could think about was the last time he'd actually looked at his mother's face. Really looked. Not through a FaceTime screen. Not in a hurry before rushing back to work. But looked at her the way he used to when he was a child and she was his entire world. He couldn't remember. The realization gutted him. At the hospital, a doctor with kind eyes and exhausted shoulders led Josh to a room where Helen lay connected to machines that beeped and hummed. She looked so small. When had she gotten so small? "She had a major heart attack," the doctor said. "The next 48 hours are critical. I have to be honest with you, Mr. Callaway, it doesn't look good." Josh sat beside her bed and took her hand. It felt fragile as paper. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here." Helen didn't wake up, but her fingers twitched against his palm. Josh stayed in that hospital room for 2 days straight. He didn't eat. Barely slept. Just sat there holding his mother's hand, watching her breathe, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. And somewhere in that fluorescent-lit room that smelled like antiseptic and desperation, Josh Callaway made a promise. A real one this time. "If you let her live," he prayed, "if you give me another chance, I will never abandon her again. I will never choose money over presents. I will never forget what matters." On the third day, Helen opened her eyes. She looked at Josh, confused at first, then understanding. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came, Mom. I thought." She trailed off, too weak to finish. But Josh knew what she thought. She thought he'd be too busy. She thought he'd send someone else, send money, send anything but himself. The fact that she thought that broke something fundamental inside him. That afternoon, Josh called his firm and quit. Not temporarily. Not for a leave of absence. He quit. They tried to talk him out of it, offered him more money, more flexibility, partnership adjustments. "I don't care," Josh said. "I'm done." Because for the first time in a decade, Josh could see clearly. He could see that he'd been chasing the wrong thing, building the wrong life, becoming someone his younger self would have hated. He'd promised his mother he'd take care of her. And he'd failed. But failure, Josh was about to learn, can be the beginning of something true. Emily Gamble believed in magic the way some people believe in God. Not with proof. With hope. She grew up in a small house in Brookline with a mother who taught her that beauty existed in ordinary moments. In the way morning light hit the kitchen table, in the sound of rain on windows, in the ritual of reading before bed. Margaret Gamble was a high school English teacher who spoke about books like they were sacred texts and treated her daughter like she was a miracle. "You have a tender heart," Margaret would tell Emily, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. "Don't let the world convince you that's a weakness. Tenderness is courage." Emily carried that belief into adulthood like a torch in a dark room. She worked at the Boston Public Library in Copley Square, the one with the beautiful architecture and the courtyard where people proposed and tourists took photos. Emily loved everything about it. The smell of old books and furniture polish, the quiet reverence people had when they walked through the doors, the way a library felt like a sanctuary from the chaos outside. She worked in the research section, helping graduate students track down obscure sources and elderly people navigate computers and everyone in between. She was good at her job because she actually cared. She remembered names. She asked follow-up questions. She treated every request like it mattered because to that person, it did. Emily's life was simple but rich. She had a small apartment in Jamaica Plain with plants in every window. She had a cat named Atticus. She had Sunday dinners with her mother. She had a boyfriend named Daniel who worked in advertising and talked about building a future together. Christmas was Emily's favorite season. Not because of the commercialism or the presents but because of the feeling, that collective exhale, that permission to be softer, more hopeful, more present. Every year, Emily would decorate her apartment like she was setting a stage for a play about joy. White lights everywhere. Cinnamon candles. A small tree decorated with ornaments she and her mother had collected over the years. Last Christmas, Emily thought she'd be getting engaged. Daniel had been dropping hints for months. Comments about rings, about wedding venues, about what kind of house they'd want. Emily let herself imagine it. A winter proposal, her mother crying happy tears, a future that looked like the life she'd always dreamed of. On Christmas Eve, Daniel came over for dinner. Emily had cooked his favorite meal, put on the dress he liked, set the table like they were in a movie. She was so nervous she could barely eat, kept watching him for signs, waiting for the moment he'd reach into his pocket. After dinner, Daniel cleared his throat. "We need to talk." Emily's heart leaped. "This is it." "I've been thinking a lot," Daniel said, not meeting her eyes. "And I think we want different things." The words didn't make sense at first. Emily actually laughed. A short, confused sound. "What?" "I'm not ready for what you want," Daniel said, still looking at the table, at the wall, anywhere but her face. "Marriage, kids, all that, I don't see it. Not with us." "But you said." "I know what I said. I'm sorry." The room tilted. "Are you breaking up with me?" Emily's voice came out small, childlike. "On Christmas Eve? I didn't plan it this way. But yes." He left before dessert. Emily sat at her perfectly set table, with the candles burning down and the Christmas lights blinking cheerfully, and she felt something crack inside her chest, like ice breaking on a frozen pond. She called her mother. Margaret came over immediately, still in her pajamas, and held Emily while she sobbed. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say. Sometimes pain is too big for words. Emily spent Christmas Day in bed. She didn't eat. Didn't answer calls from well-meaning friends. Just stared at the ceiling and wondered how someone could say they loved you and then walk away like you were nothing. The day after Christmas, Margaret called. "Honey, I need to tell you something." Emily knew from her mother's voice. She knew before the words came. "I have cancer, stage 4. They say I have maybe 6 months." Emily moved back in with her mother that week. She took a leave of absence from work, packed up her apartment, said goodbye to the life she thought she was building. For 6 months, Emily became a caretaker. She learned about medications and doctor's appointments and how to help someone bathe when they're too weak to stand. She learned what it feels like to watch someone you love disappear slowly, day by day. Margaret fought hard. Some days were good. They'd watch old movies, laugh at inside jokes, pretend things were normal. Other days were brutal. Pain that morphed her mother's face, exhaustion so profound she could barely keep her eyes open. Emily was with her mother when she died on January 15th. It was quiet. Peaceful, the hospice nurse said, though Emily would never use that word. Her mother took 3 shallow breaths, then stopped breathing, and Emily sat there holding her hand, thinking about all the times that hand had braided her hair, checked her forehead for fever, held hers during scary movies. After her mother died, Emily returned to her apartment like a ghost returning to a haunted house. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The Christmas decorations still up because she hadn't had the heart to take them down. She packed them away in January, mechanical and numb, and made a decision. She would never celebrate Christmas again. The library took Emily back in February. She returned to work like a soldier returning from war, functional but fundamentally changed. She smiled when appropriate. She helped patrons. She did her job. But there was a remoteness to her now, a wall between her and joy. Her coworkers asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," she'd say. But she wasn't fine. She was empty. That year, Emily watched autumn come and go without feeling anything. She watched other people start decorating for the holidays with an emotion somewhere between envy and resentment. How could they be so happy? How could they not know that Christmas was a lie, that it took everything and gave nothing back? By December, Emily had mastered the art of numbness. She didn't decorate, didn't buy gifts, didn't make plans. She worked extra shifts at the library because being alone in her apartment felt unbearable, and at least at work she could pretend she was fine. On December 20th, Emily was shelving books in the research section when she heard a voice she hadn't heard in 10 years. "Excuse me, do you know where I can find books about Christmas traditions?" Emily turned around, an automatic smile on her face, prepared to help another patron, and froze. Because standing in front of her, older and more handsome but unmistakably himself, was Josh Callaway, the boy she'd loved in college, the one who'd left for California and never looked back. "Emily?" His voice cracked on her name. And for the first time in almost a year, Emily felt something other than numbness. She felt everything all at once. Josh Callaway spent 3 months in Boston taking care of his mother and having a nervous breakdown. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind where you sit in your childhood bedroom at 2 a.m., staring at posters you hung when you were 16, wondering who you've become and whether it's too late to turn back. Helen recovered slowly. The doctors said it was a miracle. Her heart function improved, her energy returned, her color came back. But she was different now. Gentler. More grateful. Like surviving had taught her to hold things loosely. Josh cooked for her. Took her to doctor's appointments. Read to her at night, resurrecting the old Christmas tradition even though it was February. They talked about everything, his childhood, her fears, the ways they'd both failed and been failed. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," Josh said one night. "I'm sorry I raised you to think success meant leaving," Helen replied. They were both right. They were both wrong. They forgave each other anyway. But while Helen was healing, Josh was falling apart. Without work, without the structure that had defined his life for a decade, Josh felt unmoored. He'd quit his job, walked away from a 7-figure salary, abandoned the career that had consumed him. And now what? He had savings, enough to live on for a year, maybe 2 if he was careful. But money wasn't the question. Purpose was. Who was Josh Callaway if he wasn't the golden boy of Hartwell and Associates? He spent weeks in a fog, applying to Boston-based firms half-heartedly, going through the motions. But every interview felt wrong. The questions they asked, the culture they described, it was the same trap, just a different city. One night in March, Josh sat at his mother's kitchen table with a legal pad and a question. What do I actually want? Not what his colleagues wanted. Not what would impress people. Not what would prove anything. What did Josh Callaway, the human being, actually want? The answer surprised him. He wanted to build something. Not for glory. Not for ego. But because he was good at it and it mattered. He wanted financial security, for himself, for his mother, for any future family he might have. But he wanted it on his terms, in a way that didn't require sacrificing his humanity. He wanted to live in Boston. Near his mother. Near the life he'd left behind. And underneath all of it, buried so deep he almost missed it, he wanted to be the kind of man someone could actually love. Not the idea of him, not his bank account, but the real, flawed, trying his best version of himself. So Josh made a decision that terrified him. He'd start his own investment firm. Not a big one. Not a flashy one. Just him and his expertise and his network. He'd work with clients who aligned with his values. Small businesses, ethical companies, people trying to build something real. He'd make enough to live well, but not so much that it ate his soul. He'd build a life, not just a career. In April, Josh registered his company, Callaway Capital Management. He rented a small office in the financial district. 1 room, terrible lighting, a desk he bought from IKEA. He reached out to old contacts, pitched his services, networked at every event he could find. And failed. For months, Josh failed spectacularly. Potential clients said no. Old colleagues thought he was crazy. The rejections piled up like snow in a Boston winter. Heavy, cold, endless. By June, Josh had exactly 2 clients and $12,000 in revenue. His savings were dwindling. His confidence was shot. He started wondering if he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Maybe I should just get a regular job, he told his mother one night. Helen looked at him with those dark eyes that still had the power to see right through him. Is that what you want? I want to not fail. Then you've already failed, Helen said. Because playing it safe when you know you're meant for something more? That's the real failure, baby. So Josh kept going. He cold called. He networked. He offered free consultations. He worked 18-hour days from his tiny office, surviving on coffee and stubbornness. And then, in late September, something shifted. A small tech company Josh had been courting for months finally said yes. He helped them restructure their investment strategy, and within 2 weeks, they saw a 30% return. Word spread. In October, Josh signed 3 new clients. By November, he had 8. And on December 1st, Josh closed a deal with a biotech firm that netted him $10 million in managed assets. $10 million? Josh sat in his office staring at the contract, feeling like he'd just summited Everest. This was different from his success in LA. That had felt like winning someone else's game. This felt like building something that mattered, something sustainable, something that wouldn't require him to sacrifice the parts of himself he'd only just started to reclaim. He called his mother immediately. Mom, we did it. Helen's voice shook with pride. I knew you would, baby. I always knew. That night, Josh took his mother out to dinner at the nicest restaurant in Boston, the kind of place they used to walk past when he was a kid and she'd say, maybe someday. Someday had arrived. Over dessert, Helen looked at her son with tears in her eyes. You know what I want for Christmas? She asked. Name it. Grandchildren. Josh laughed. I'm working on it, Mom. No, you're not. You're working on work. Again. She wasn't wrong. Josh had been so focused on building the company, on proving to himself that he could succeed without losing his soul, that he'd completely neglected his personal life. He hadn't dated anyone seriously in years. Hadn't let anyone close. Hadn't even thought about what a real relationship might look like. I'll tell you what, Helen said, squeezing his hand across the table. This Christmas I don't want gifts. I want you to slow down. I want you to be present. I want you to remember what matters. I promise, Josh said. And this time he meant it. On December 20th, Josh woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. Not anxiety, not excitement, but something gentler. Anticipation maybe. Hope. It was the first Christmas in years that he'd actually be home. Not sending gifts from a distance, not making excuses, actually home. He decided to do something he hadn't done since college. Go to the library. Not for work. Not for research. But because there was something about libraries, the quiet, the smell of books, the sense that time moved differently inside those walls, that always made him feel like himself. It was a small pilgrimage. A returning to something he'd lost. Josh walked through the December cold to the Boston Public Library in Copley Square, that beautiful old building he'd spent so many hours in as a student. Inside, it was warm and hushed and exactly as he remembered. He wandered toward the research section looking for the Christmas traditions section. And that's when he saw her. Emily Gamble. She was shelving books, her back to him, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a gray sweater and jeans and moved with an efficiency that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times. For a moment, Josh forgot how to breathe. He'd thought about Emily over the years, late at night, in moments of weakness, wondering what had happened to her, whether she was happy, whether she ever thought about him too. They'd met in college, both of them work-study students at the BU library. Emily had been studying literature. Josh had been drowning in economics textbooks. They'd become friends first, talking during late shifts, sharing coffee, laughing about terrible patrons and ridiculous research requests. And then one night, studying together at 2 a.m., Josh had looked up from his notes and caught Emily watching him with an expression he couldn't quite name. What? He'd asked. Nothing, she'd said, blushing. You have this intensity when you work. It's kind of beautiful. They'd dated for 8 months. It was the most real relationship Josh had ever had, built on conversations that lasted until sunrise, on shared dreams about the future, on the feeling that someone actually saw him. Not the ambitious kid desperate to escape poverty, just him. But then Josh got the job offer in LA. And Emily had been accepted to a graduate program in Boston. They tried to make it work long distance for 3 months. But the time difference and the demands of their respective lives and the way Josh was already starting to disappear into his work, it all added up to an inevitable ending. They'd broken up over the phone. Josh remembered Emily crying, her voice breaking. "I love you, but I can't love someone who's never actually here." "I'm sorry" was all he'd managed to say. And he was. But not sorry enough to choose differently. That was 10 years ago. And now here she was, in a library in Boston, shelving books like the entire decade between then and now had never happened. Josh's heart hammered against his ribs. He could walk away. Pretend he hadn't seen her. Let sleeping dogs lie. But he'd spent 10 years running from things that mattered. He was done running. "Excuse me," Josh said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Do you know where I can find books about Christmas traditions?" Emily turned around, professional smile in place. And then she saw him. Her smile froze. Her eyes widened. Her entire body went rigid. "Josh." It came out as barely a whisper. "Hey, Emily." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Two people who'd meant something once, who'd walked away, who were standing in the same room for the first time in a decade. And neither of them had any idea what to say next. "What are you doing here?" Emily's voice was steady but her hands were shaking. She gripped the book she'd been about to shelve, a thick hardcover about Renaissance art, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Josh stood there in a navy pea coat dusted with snow, looking older but somehow more himself than he had in LA. The sharp edges he'd developed out west had softened. There was something quieter about him now. Something more present. "I moved back," Josh said. "A few months ago. I live here now." "In Boston?" "Yeah." Emily set the book down on the cart beside her because she didn't trust herself to keep holding it. Her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the Josh she'd known, the ambitious boy who'd chosen California over her, over them, over everything, with the man standing in front of her now. "I didn't know," she said, which was obvious but all she could manage. "I know I should have. I didn't think." Josh trailed off, running a hand through his hair. It was a gesture Emily remembered, something he did when he was nervous. The familiarity of it made her chest ache. "How long has it been?" Josh asked. 10 years, 3 months, 18 days. The words came out before Emily could stop them. She watched Josh's expression shift, surprise, then something that looked like pain. "You counted." "No. I remember when you left." The air between them felt charged, heavy with everything unsaid. Other patrons moved around them, oblivious to the reunion happening in the middle of the research section. Someone coughed. A chair scraped against the floor. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that Emily's entire world had just tilted. "Can we talk?" Josh asked. Are you on break? Or after work?" I'd really like to catch up." Emily should have said no. She should have made an excuse, busy, other plans, anything. Because talking to Josh meant opening a door she'd sealed shut. It meant risking feeling something other than the carefully maintained numbness she'd been living in for the past year. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she didn't remember from before, that made her pause. "I have a break in 20 minutes, she heard herself say. "There's a coffee shop on the corner." Josh's face lit up with a smile that made him look 22 again. "Perfect. I'll meet you there." Emily watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the main reading room. Then she stood there, alone among the stacks, trying to remember how to breathe. This is a mistake, she thought. But her hands were already moving, straightening her sweater, checking her reflection in the glass of a nearby display case. She looked tired. She looked older. She looked like someone who'd spent a year grieving. "You okay?" Emily turned to find Marcia, her supervisor, a kind woman in her 60s who'd worked at the library for 30 years, watching her with concern. "Yeah, I ran into someone I used to know." "The handsome one in the pea coat?" Despite everything, Emily felt herself smile. "Yeah, him. Old flame?" "Something like that." Marcia studied her for a moment. "When was the last time I saw you smile like that?" Emily's smile faded. "I don't know." "Then go," Marcia said gently. "Take your break. Take an extra 15 minutes if you need it. Life's too short to hide from things that make you feel alive, honey." The coffee shop, the daily grind, was packed with students and business people seeking refuge from the December cold. Emily spotted Josh immediately, sitting at a small table by the window. He'd already ordered 2 coffees. "I got you a latte," he said as she approached. "Extra foam, no sugar." "Unless you've changed?" "No," Emily said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Still the same." It was such a small thing, remembering how she took her coffee, but it made her throat tight. For a moment they just sat there, hands wrapped around warm cups, not quite looking at each other. "You look good," Josh finally said. "I look tired." "No. You look, I don't know, like yourself. More yourself than before, if that makes sense." It didn't, but Emily didn't say that. "So," she said instead, "tell me about the last 10 years in 2 minutes." Josh laughed, a soft, rueful sound. "That's a lot to summarize. Then tell me the important parts." So he did. He told her about Los Angeles, about the success that felt hollow, about his mother's heart attack, about quitting and starting over and building something new. He spoke without pretension, without the bragging she might have expected from someone describing that kind of financial success. Instead, he talked about it like he was describing a near-death experience, something he'd survived but wouldn't wish on anyone. "I thought I wanted to conquer the world," Josh said, staring into his coffee. "Turns out I just wanted to stop running from myself." Emily understood that more than he knew. "What about you?" Josh asked. "Tell me your last decade." Emily's hands tightened around her cup. She could lie. She could give him the sanitized version, work, friends, life continuing. She could protect herself from the vulnerability of honesty. But something about the way Josh was looking at her, really looking like he could see past the walls she'd built, made her tell the truth. "I worked here. At the library. I dated someone for 3 years. He broke up with me last Christmas Eve." Josh winced. "Christ. I'm sorry. And then my mom got sick. Stage 4 cancer. She died in January." The words landed in the space between them like stones dropping into water. Josh's face crumpled. "Emily." "So it's been a rough year," she continued, her voice determinedly steady. "But I'm fine, I'm working, I'm functional, I'm here." "Are you really fine?" The question was so gentle it nearly broke her. "No," Emily whispered. "No, I'm not fine at all." And then, to her absolute horror, she started crying. Not delicate tears. The ugly kind, the kind that come with gasping breaths and a runny nose and the feeling that you're breaking apart in public. She covered her face with her hands, mortified, trying to stop, but the grief she'd been holding back for months came flooding out. She felt Josh move, heard his chair scrape. And then his arms were around her, pulling her close, and she was crying into his shoulder like they were still 22 and he was still the person who knew how to hold her when the world felt too big. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." "Don't," Josh murmured into her hair. "Don't apologize for being human." They stayed like that for several minutes, Josh holding her while she fell apart, the coffee shop noise continuing around them, strangers pretending not to notice or genuinely not caring. When Emily finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her mascara was probably everywhere. "I'm a mess," she said. "You're grieving," Josh corrected. "There's a difference." Emily grabbed a napkin and tried to clean herself up. "I don't know why I just told you all that." "Because I asked. And because sometimes it's easier to tell the truth to someone who already knows how to see you." Emily looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw something that hadn't been there 10 years ago. Depth. The Josh she'd dated in college had been ambitious and driven and kind, but there'd been a restlessness to him, a sense that he was always looking toward the next thing. This Josh was different. This Josh was still. This Josh was here. "I thought about you," Josh said quietly. "Over the years. I wondered if you were happy." "I thought about you too," Emily admitted. "I told myself you were probably some big shot in California with a perfect life. My life was pretty far from perfect." "Mine too." They sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd lived entirely separate lives suddenly finding themselves in the same story again. "Can I ask you something?" Josh said. "Okay. Can I see you again? Not just today. Like, actually see you. Spend time with you. I know it's been 10 years and you probably have every reason to say no, but..." "Why?" Emily interrupted. "Why what? Why do you want to see me again?" Josh leaned back in his chair, considering the question seriously. "Because sitting here with you, even with everything we just talked about, even with how hard it is the most real I've felt in years. Because I spent a decade building a life that looked good on paper and felt empty in practice. And because when I saw you in that library, I felt like I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for." Emily's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I'm not the person you remember," she said. "I'm not that hopeful girl anymore." "Great," Josh said. "I'm not that kid who thought success meant abandoning everything that mattered either. Maybe we can figure out who we are now. Together." Emily wanted to say yes. She wanted it so badly it scared her. but wanting something and being ready for it were two different things. I need to think about it, she said finally. That's fair. I mean, you left me once. You chose LA over us. And I understand why, and I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, but I can't go through that again. I can't let myself care about someone who's going to disappear. I'm not going anywhere, Josh said, his voice firm. I learned that lesson the hard way. I'm here. In Boston. Building a life that actually matters. And if you give me a chance, I'll prove it to you. Emily stood up, her coffee barely touched. I need to get back to work. Josh stood too. Can I call you? I don't know if I'm ready for this, Josh. I'm not asking you to be ready. I'm just asking for a chance. Emily looked at him, at this man who was familiar and strange all at once, and felt something crack inside her carefully maintained walls. The library closes at 8, she heard herself say. If you want to walk me home, you can. Josh's entire face transformed. Really? Don't make me regret it. I won't. I promise. Emily walked back to work with her heart pounding and her mind spinning. She'd spent a year building walls to protect herself from feeling anything. And in the span of one coffee break, Josh Callaway had found a crack in the foundation. The question was, did she have the courage to let him in? Or would she spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been? Josh showed up at the library at 7:45 p.m. Emily saw him through the tall windows, pacing on the sidewalk outside, his breath visible in the cold December air, checking his watch like he was worried she'd changed her mind. She almost had. 3 times during her shift, Emily had talked herself out of this. It was too risky. Too fast, too everything. But every time she convinced herself to text him and cancel, something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he'd held her while she cried, without judgment or discomfort. Maybe it was the fact that he'd remembered how she took her coffee after 10 years. Maybe it was just that she was tired of being numb, and Josh made her feel something, even if that something was terrifying. Ready? Josh asked when she finally emerged, wrapped in her gray wool coat. As I will ever be. They walked in silence for the first block, their footsteps crunching on the salt-covered sidewalk. Boston in December was beautiful in a harsh way. Christmas lights reflected off snow-covered brownstones, cold air that made your lungs ache, people hurrying past with their heads down against the wind. Where do you live? Josh asked. Jamaica Plain, about 20 minutes on foot, or we can take the T. Let's walk unless you're too cold? I'm okay. They walked through the public garden, past the empty swan boats and the frozen pond. Emily used to love this park, used to come here with her mother in the spring to see the tulips. Now it just felt like another place haunted by absence. Can I ask you something? Josh said. You've been asking me things all day. One more. What was your mom like? The question caught Emily off guard. Most people avoided mentioning her mother like grief was contagious. She was the best person I've ever known, Emily said slowly. She taught high school English for 30 years. She believed that books could save people. She had this way of making everyone feel seen, like whatever you were going through mattered to her. She sounds like where you got your heart. Emily smiled despite herself. Yeah, she was. What's your favorite memory of her? Emily thought about it as they walked. There were so many birthday cakes and bedtime stories, and the way her mother would sing while cooking, completely off-key but full of joy. Every Sunday, Emily said, we'd have dinner together. Just the two of us. And after dinner we'd each share 3 good things from our week. It was this little ritual. Sometimes the good things were big, promotions or achievements or whatever. But usually they were small. Like, I saw a cardinal, or, someone held the door for me, or, I finished a really good book. Mom used to say that noticing the small good things is how you survive the big bad things. Josh was quiet for a moment. Then, did you do it last Sunday? What? 3 good things. Emily hadn't. She'd spent last Sunday the way she spent most Sundays now, working late to avoid going home to an empty apartment, then ordering takeout and watching television until she fell asleep on the couch. No, she admitted. Want to try now? Josh. Come on. In honor of your mom. 3 good things from this week. Emily wanted to refuse, but something about the way he asked, gentle but insistent, made her consider it. Okay, she said finally. 1. A kid at the library was struggling with his homework and I helped him figure it out. He was so happy he hugged me. That's a good one. 2. I found a first edition of a book I've been looking for. Someone donated it and had no idea what it was worth. Nice. And 3. Emily hesitated. Then quietly, running into you. Josh stopped walking. They were on the Commonwealth Avenue Mall now, surrounded by bare trees strung with white lights. Really? He asked. I didn't say it was comfortable. But it was something. And I've spent the last year feeling nothing. So yeah. Running into you makes the list. Josh's expression did something complicated, joy and pain and gratitude all mixed together. You want to hear mine? He asked. Your 3 good things? Yeah. 1. My mom made her famous cinnamon rolls this morning. First time since before her heart attack. That's great. 2. I closed a deal this week that means I can actually pay myself a real salary instead of living on savings. Congratulations. And 3. Josh stepped closer. Seeing you again, talking to you, walking through Boston with you like we're 22 and the whole world is ahead of us. Emily's breath caught. Josh. I'm not trying to rush you, he said quickly. I just want you to know. You asked me earlier why I want to see you again. This is why. Because you're the first thing in years that's felt like a good thing worth counting. They stood there in the cold, streetlights casting shadows across Josh's face, and Emily felt the walls she'd built shaking. I'm really scared, she whispered. Of me? Of feeling things, of wanting things, of letting myself hope and having it all fall apart again. I can't promise nothing will fall apart, Josh said. I can't promise I won't mess up or that life won't throw us more curveballs. But I can promise I won't leave. Not like before. I'm not that person anymore. How do I know that? You don't? Not yet. But let me prove it to you. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold but from the overwhelming vulnerability of this moment. I need to take this slow, she said. We can go as slow as you want. And I need you to understand that I'm not okay right now. I'm grieving and damaged and probably terrible company. Emily. Josh's voice was so gentle it hurt. I spent 10 years choosing work over everything that mattered. I ignored my mother until she almost died. I built a life I thought I wanted and it nearly destroyed me. You think you're the only one here who's damaged? I guess not. So maybe we can be damaged together. And maybe it'll be a disaster. But maybe, and I know this sounds crazy, but maybe we can help each other find our way back to something that feels like living. Emily looked up at him, this man who was offering her something she wasn't sure she knew how to accept. I'm not ready to date you, she said finally. Okay. But, we could be friends. Maybe. If you want that. Josh smiled. I would love that. They started walking again and the tension that had been building between them eased slightly. Friendship felt safer than whatever else was happening here. More manageable. They talked the rest of the way to Emily's apartment. About books they'd read, about Boston changing over the years, about nothing particularly deep. It felt almost normal. Almost easy. When they reached her building, a 3-story walk-up with a worn front door, Emily turned to face him. This is me. Nice neighborhood. It's quiet. I like it. An awkward pause. Well, Josh said. Thanks for letting me walk you home. Thanks for, I don't know, being kind to me today. Emily. Josh's voice was serious now. I'm going to keep showing up. Not in a creepy way. But I'm going to be around. Is that okay? Yeah, Emily said. That's okay. She went inside, climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, and locked the door behind her. Atticus, her gray tabby, meowed indignantly at her late arrival. Emily fed him, then sat on her couch in the dark, lights off, just staring at nothing. She'd held it together all day, but now, alone, she let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. Josh Callaway was back in her life. The boy she'd loved. The man who'd left. The person who'd just looked at her with such tenderness she'd almost forgotten what that felt like. Emily pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, something she'd started doing after her mother died, a way to keep the ritual of 3 good things alive even when she couldn't bear to say them out loud. She typed, 3 good things from today. 1. A patron thanked me for helping them find their great-grandmother's immigration records too. The snow was pretty this morning. 3. Just. Then she deleted the third one, wrote it again, deleted it again. Finally she left it. Josh was a good thing. She didn't know what that meant yet. Didn't know if letting him back into her life was brave or stupid. But for the first time in almost a year, Emily felt something other than emptiness. She felt possibility. And that was terrifying. And necessary. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of healing. The next afternoon, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Josh. Got your number from the library directory, not creepy I swear, I asked Marcia. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? Just as friends. I know a great Italian place. Emily stared at the message for 5 full minutes. Then another text came through. No pressure. But my mom asked me what I'm doing for Christmas and I told her I'd made a friend and she insists I invite you to dinner. She's very excited to meet you. Again, no pressure. But Helen Callaway's Christmas dinner is kind of legendary. Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was moving too fast. Way too fast. She should slow it down, keep Josh at a distance, protect herself. But then she thought about Christmas, about spending it alone in her apartment, avoiding the memories, numbing herself with work and television and the careful routine of survival. And she thought about Josh's mother, who Emily had never met but who'd raised a man capable of driving across the country when she needed him, of quitting everything to be present, of showing up even when it was hard. What should I bring? Emily typed. Josh's response came immediately. Just yourself. December 24th, 6 p.m. I'll text you the address. This is just as friends? Scout's honor. Though my mom might try to set us up. Fair warning. Despite herself, Emily smiled. See you then. She put her phone down and took a deep breath. Christmas Eve dinner with Josh Callaway and his mother. What could possibly go wrong? The days between that text and Christmas Eve passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Emily changed her mind 17 times. She'd go. She wouldn't go. She'd go but leave early. She'd make an excuse. She'd be honest and tell Josh she wasn't ready. She'd be brave and show up. On December 22nd, Josh texted her. Still on for Tuesday? I think so, Emily replied. You think so? I'm nervous. About meeting my mom or about seeing me? Both. Josh called her instead of texting back. Emily stared at her ringing phone like it was a live grenade before finally answering. Hey, she said. Hey. Josh's voice was warm, familiar. Talk to me. What are you nervous about? Emily sat down on her couch, Atticus immediately jumping into her lap. This feels like more than friendship, she admitted. Does it? Josh. Okay, yeah. It probably does. But that doesn't mean we can't take it slow. Your mom is going to think we're dating. So? Let her think whatever she wants. We know the truth. Do we? Silence on the other end of the line. Then Josh said carefully, What's the truth, Emily? I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I want. I just know I'm scared of getting hurt again. I understand that. And I'm not going to push you into anything you're not ready for. But Emily? Yeah? Sometimes the things that scare us are the things we need most. Emily closed her eyes. That sounds like something my mom would have said. Then maybe your mom was smart. Despite everything, Emily laughed. She was. She really was. So come to dinner. Meet my mom. Eat too much food and laugh at Helen Callaway's stories about me as a kid. And if at any point it feels like too much, we'll step outside and you can tell me. Deal? Deal. And Emily? Yeah. Thank you. For giving me this chance. I know you don't owe me anything and I know I haven't earned your trust yet. But I'm grateful. After they hung up, Emily sat in the quiet of her apartment, feeling something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what to call it. Excitement. Not the anxious, nervous kind. The real kind. The butterflies in your stomach, maybe something good is coming kind. She was terrified. But she was also, for the first time in over a year, alive. On December 23rd, Josh showed up at the library with coffee. Emily was helping a patron find tax documents when she saw him through the window, waiting outside with 2 cups from the daily grind. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. When she finished helping the patron, she went outside. What are you doing here? She asked. Bringing you coffee, Josh said, handing her a latte. Extra foam, no sugar. You already know how I take my coffee. You don't need to keep proving it. I know. But maybe I wanted to see you. Emily tried to fight the smile tugging at her lips. We're seeing each other tomorrow? Is there a limit on how often friends can see each other? Most friends don't show up at each other's workplaces with coffee. Then I guess I'm not most friends. They stood there on the cold sidewalk, steam rising from their cups, snow beginning to fall in light flakes. I'm not used to this, Emily said quietly. Used to what? Someone showing up. Consistently. Without me having to ask. Josh's expression softened. Get used to it. Josh. I know you're scared. I know you think I'm going to disappear. But I'm going to keep showing up, Emily. Over and over. Until you believe it. What if I never believe it? Then I'll keep showing up anyway. Emily didn't know what to say to that. So she just stood there holding her coffee, feeling the weight of his words. I should get back to work, she said finally. Okay. But Em? She looked up at the nickname, Something he used to call her in college, something she'd forgotten about. I'm really glad you're coming tomorrow. Emily watched him walk away, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed. There was a confidence to him that was different from before, not arrogance, just certainty. Like he knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to pursue it. She went back inside and Marcia was standing behind the circulation desk with a knowing smile. That's the one from the other day? Yeah. He's smitten. We're just friends. Oh honey, Marcia laughed. Nobody brings just friends coffee in the middle of a workday with that look on their face. Emily couldn't argue with that. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear with the kind of blue sky that made the snow sparkle like diamonds. Emily spent the morning cleaning her apartment and the afternoon having a complete wardrobe crisis. What did you wear to dinner at your maybe ex maybe something boyfriend's house when you were meeting his mother for the first time, but also it wasn't a date? She tried on 6 different outfits before settling on a dark blue dress. Simple, elegant, with a slit up the side that her mother had always said made her look like a movie star. She paired it with low heels and silver earrings her mother had given her on her last birthday. Looking in the mirror, Emily saw someone who looked almost like herself. Not quite, but close. At 5:45 p.m., Emily stood outside Josh's childhood apartment building with a bottle of wine in one hand and her heart in her throat. She could still leave. She could text an excuse. She could protect herself from whatever this was. But Emily was tired of protecting herself. Tired of surviving instead of living. She pressed the buzzer for apartment 3C. Come on up. Josh's voice came through the intercom, warm and welcoming. Emily climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her heels clicking on the worn steps, and found Josh waiting at the open door. He froze when he saw her. Just completely stopped moving, his hand still on the doorknob, his mouth slightly open. You look. He seemed to have forgotten how to complete sentences. You look beautiful. Emily felt her cheeks flush. It's just a dress. It's not just a dress. You look, wow. Behind him, Emily heard a woman's voice, lighter, musical, tinged with amusement. Are you going to let the poor girl freeze in the hallway, or are you going to invite her inside? Josh shook himself out of his trance. Right, sorry, come in. Please. Emily stepped into apartment 3C and was immediately wrapped in warmth, both temperature and atmosphere. The space was small but cozy, decorated with obvious love. Christmas lights were strung around the windows, an old artificial tree stood in the corner adorned with mismatched ornaments that looked handmade, and the smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread filled the air. And there, standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder and joy radiating from every inch of her small frame, was Helen Callaway. You must be Emily, Helen said, crossing the room with arms outstretched. Come here, sweet girl. Before Emily could respond, she was pulled into a hug. The kind of hug that said I've been waiting to meet you and you're already family and welcome home all at once. Emily's eyes stung with unexpected tears. It's so nice to meet you, Emily managed. Helen pulled back, keeping her hands on Emily's shoulders, studying her face with dark eyes that were exactly like Josh's. My son didn't do you justice, Helen said. He said you were pretty. You're not pretty. You're stunning. Mom? What? I'm just stating facts. Helen winked at Emily. Come sit. Dinner's almost ready. Josh, get this girl some wine. The evening unfolded like a dream Emily didn't want to wake from. Helen was exactly the kind of person Emily's mother would have loved. Warm, funny, with stories that made you laugh and wisdom that made you think. Over dinner, roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans almondine, fresh rolls that Helen had made from scratch. Helen told stories about Josh as a child. He was so serious, Helen said, passing the rolls. Even at 5 years old. Always reading, always asking questions. I used to worry he'd forget to be a kid. I had fun, Josh protested. You had responsibilities. There's a difference. Emily watched the way Josh looked at his mother, with such obvious love and gratitude that it made her chest ache. Whatever complicated history they had, whatever years Josh had missed, it was clear they'd found their way back to each other. After dinner they moved to the living room. Helen brought out photo albums, actual physical albums that were falling apart at the seams. Oh God, Josh groaned. Do we have to? Absolutely we do, Helen said, patting the couch beside her. Emily needs to see what she's dealing with. Emily laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. She spent the next hour looking at pictures of Josh growing up. Josh missing his 2 front teeth, Josh at his high school graduation looking impossibly young, Josh and Helen at his college graduation, both of them beaming. He was such a good boy, Helen said softly, her finger tracing a photo of teenage Josh reading on the couch, the exact same couch they were sitting on now. He worked so hard. Sometimes too hard. I used to worry about him burning out. Mom? Let me finish. Helen looked at Emily now. He went away for a while. Lost himself a bit. But he found his way back. And you know what I've learned? Sometimes people need to get lost to figure out what really matters. Emily felt Josh tense beside her. What matters? Emily asked quietly. The people you love, Helen said simply. That's it. That's the only thing that matters in the end. After the photos, Helen made hot chocolate, from scratch just like Josh had described, and they moved back to the couch. Josh read aloud from a collection of Christmas stories, and Emily felt something in her chest that had been frozen for months begin to thaw. This was what Christmas was supposed to feel like. Not the perfect Instagram version, but the real version. Messy and warm and full of love. Around 10 p.m. Helen yawned. I think this old lady needs to go to bed, she said. But Emily, before you go, please come here. Emily stood, expecting another hug. Instead, Helen took both her hands. I don't know what's happening between you and my son, Helen said, her voice low enough that Josh couldn't hear from across the room. And that's none of my business. But I see the way he looks at you. And I see the way you look at him, like you want to trust it but you're afraid. Emily's breath caught. I can't promise he won't mess up, Helen continued. He's human. We all mess up. But I can promise you this, Josh has learned what matters. And whatever he's pursuing with you, he means it. He's not that boy anymore who ran away from the hard stuff. He's a man who shows up. Tears were sliding down Emily's cheeks before she could stop them. I don't know if I'm ready, Emily whispered. None of us are ever ready for the things that change us, sweet girl. We just have to be brave enough to try. Helen hugged her again, whispered Merry Christmas in her ear, and disappeared into her bedroom. Josh walked Emily downstairs and outside, where fresh snow had begun to fall. I'm going to call you a car, Josh said. You don't have to. I want to. It's late and it's cold and I want to know you got home safe. While they waited for the car, they stood in the quiet of the snow-covered street. Your mom is amazing, Emily said. I know. I'm lucky. No. You're loved. There's a difference. Josh turned to face her. Do you know what she said to me before you got here? What? She said, that girl has been hurt. So don't hurt her. And don't give up on her when she's too scared to let you in. She's worth the patience. Emily's heart was hammering. Josh. I'm not trying to pressure you, he said quickly. I just want you to know. I'm not going anywhere. No matter how long it takes. The car pulled up, headlights cutting through the falling snow. Emily stood there, caught between the safety of leaving and the terrifying vulnerability of staying. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why me? After all these years, after everything that's happened, why are you pursuing this? Josh was quiet for a long moment, snowflakes catching in his hair. Because, he said finally, when I was at my lowest point, sitting in that hospital room with my mom, making promises to God about what I'd do differently if I got another chance, one of the things I realized was that I'd let the best thing that ever happened to me slip away. You weren't just my college girlfriend, Emily. You were the person who saw me. The real me under all the ambition and fear. And I walked away from that because I thought success meant something else. He stepped closer. And then I saw you in that library and it was like the universe was saying, here's your second chance. Don't waste it. So no, I don't know if this will work. I don't know if you'll ever trust me enough to let me in. But I know that trying, that showing up, that being present, that's the most important thing I've done in years. Emily's vision blurred with tears. I am scared, she whispered. I know. Me too. What if we mess this up? Then we mess it up. But at least we tried. The car honked gently. Emily looked at Josh, really looked at him, and made a decision. She stepped forward, stood on her toes, and kissed his cheek. Thank you, she whispered. For tonight. For showing up. For being patient. Josh's hand came up to touch his cheek where she'd kissed him, like he was trying to memorize the feeling. Merry Christmas, Emily. Merry Christmas, Josh. She got in the car and watched him through the rear window as they pulled away, standing there in the snow, hand still on his cheek, smiling like she'd just given him the greatest gift in the world. And maybe she had hope. The day after Christmas, Emily woke up to 17 texts from Josh. Not all at once. Spread throughout the night and morning, each one capturing a different thought, a different moment. 2:47 a.m., can't sleep. Keep thinking about tonight. 3:15 a.m., That came out weird, not in a creepy way. Just, it was really nice having you there. 8:23 a.m., good morning. Hope you slept better than I did. 8:45 a.m., my mom asked when she gets to see you again. I told her I was working on it. 9:30 a.m., want to go ice skating? There's a rink in the common. Very Boston. Very Christmas, why even though Christmas is technically over. 9:35 a.m., that was me asking you on a friend date. To be clear. 9:37 a.m., unless you want it to be more than a friend date. In which case I'm asking you on a real date. 9:40 a.m., I'm going to stop texting now before I make this worse. Emily read through them all, smiling despite herself, and typed back. Ice skating sounds nice. What time? Josh's response was immediate. 2 p.m.? I'll meet you at the rink. See you there. Emily spent the morning in a strange state of nervous anticipation. She hadn't been ice skating in years, not since before her mother got sick. She and Margaret used to go every winter, gliding around the rink while Christmas music played and the city lights sparkled around them. The memory hurt. But it didn't destroy her like it would have a month ago. Maybe that was healing. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to hold it without being consumed. At 1:45 p.m., Emily arrived at Frog Pond wearing jeans, a thick sweater, and her warmest coat. The rink was crowded with families and couples, everyone rosy-cheeked and laughing, the air filled with the sound of blades on ice and holiday music that hadn't been turned off even though Christmas had passed. Josh was already there, skating backward in slow circles, watching for her. When he saw her, his entire face lit up. He skated over to the entrance, moving with a grace that surprised her. "You're good at this," Emily said. "South Boston kid. We practically lived at the MDC rink growing up." He held out his hand. "Ready?" Emily looked at his outstretched hand, strong, steady, offering support without demanding anything. She took it. The moment her skates hit the ice, Emily wobbled. Josh immediately steadied her, his other hand going to her waist. "I've got you," he said. And he did. They skated slowly at first, Josh moving backward so he could keep his eyes on her, making sure she didn't fall. Emily held on to him tighter than necessary, but he didn't seem to mind. "You're doing great," Josh said. "I'm holding on to you like a lifeline." "So?" "That's allowed." Gradually, Emily found her rhythm. The muscle memory came back. The push and glide, the way to shift your weight, the feeling of moving smoothly across the ice. After about 20 minutes, she let go of Josh's hands and skated on her own. He stayed close but gave her space. Watching. Ready to catch her if she fell, but letting her move independently. They skated for over an hour, sometimes together, sometimes apart. They talked about nothing important. Favorite movies, worst jobs they'd ever had, ridiculous things they'd done as teenagers. It was easy. Natural. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. At one point, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, skated past them and wiped out spectacularly. Josh immediately went to help her up while her panicked mother skated over. Emily watched him crouch down to the girl's level, checking if she was okay, making her laugh by pretending to fall himself. The tenderness in the gesture made Emily's chest tight. This was who Josh Callaway was now. Not the ambitious boy who'd left. Not the workaholic who'd chosen success over presence. But this man, kind, patient, present. When they finally left the rink, their faces red from cold and exertion, Josh suggested hot chocolate at a nearby cafe. They sat by the window, warming their hands on steaming mugs, watching people pass by on the busy street. "Can I ask you something personal?" Josh said. Emily tensed slightly but nodded. "Okay. What was the hardest part? After your mom died?" Emily stared into her hot chocolate, watching the marshmallows slowly melt. "The silence," she said finally. "I'd come home and the apartment would be so quiet. No one to call and tell about my day. No one who'd ask how I was doing and actually want to know. Just silence everywhere. Do you still feel that way?" "Sometimes. But less than before." "What changed?" Emily looked up at him. "You showed up." Josh's expression did something complicated, joy and pain and gratitude all mixed together. "I'm glad I did," he said quietly. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the cafe warm and busy around them. "Want to know something?" Josh said. "Yes." "This, skating with you, drinking hot chocolate, just being here, this is the best Christmas I've had in a decade. It's December 26th. Christmas is over. Tell that to my heart." Emily laughed, a real, genuine laugh that surprised her. "Did you just use the cheesiest line ever?" "I absolutely did." "Was it too much?" "It was terrible." But did it work? Emily smiled. Maybe a little. Over the next week, Josh showed up constantly. Not smothering. Not overwhelming. Just present. He brought her lunch at the library on her break. He texted her funny memes at random times during the day. He invited her to a bookstore reading, to a movie, to dinner with him and his mother. He showed up. Over and over. Without pressure. Without expectations. Just consistent, steady presence. Emily found herself looking forward to seeing him. Found herself checking her phone for his texts. Found herself disappointed on the rare days when their schedules didn't align. The walls she'd built were crumbling and she was too exhausted to keep rebuilding them. On New Year's Eve, Josh invited Emily to a party some friends from college were throwing. "You don't have to," he said. "I know parties might not be your thing right now. But I thought, maybe it could be fun? Fresh start, new year, all that." Emily almost said no. Parties meant noise and people and having to be on in a way that felt exhausting. But then she thought about spending New Year's Eve alone in her apartment, falling asleep before midnight like she had last year, waking up to a new year that felt exactly like the old one. "Okay," she heard herself say. Josh picked her up at 9 p.m. Emily had worn a simple black dress and red lipstick, her mother's signature look for special occasions. Looking in the mirror, she'd seen Margaret Gamble staring back at her, and instead of breaking down, she'd smiled. "You'd like him, Mom," she thought. "I think you'd really like him." The party was in Cambridge, a beautiful brownstone filled with warm lighting and laughter and people who seemed genuinely happy to see each other. Josh introduced Emily to his friends from college, people with kind faces and easy humor who treated her like she belonged without asking questions about where she'd been or why they hadn't met her before. As midnight approached, everyone gathered in the living room, counting down, champagne glasses raised. Emily found herself standing next to Josh, their shoulders touching in the crowded space. 10, 9, 8. Josh leaned close to her ear. "Can I tell you something?" 7, 6, 5. "What?" Emily whispered. 4, 3, 2. "I'm falling in love with you again," Josh said. "And I don't think I ever really stopped." 1. "Happy New Year." The room erupted in cheers and hugs and kisses. Emily stood frozen, Josh's words ringing in her ears, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Josh was watching her with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror, like he'd just jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if she'd catch him or let him fall. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Around them, couples were kissing. Friends were hugging. Everyone was celebrating the fresh start, the new beginning, the promise of a better year. Josh stepped back slightly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." Emily grabbed his hand. "Don't apologize. I just needed you to know. I'm not expecting anything. Emily pulled him toward her and kissed him. Not a gentle, tentative kiss. A real kiss. The kind that says I'm scared and I'm broken and I'm not ready but I'm choosing you anyway. Josh froze for half a second, surprised. Then his arms wrapped around her waist and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Emily kept her forehead pressed against his. "I'm not falling in love with you," she whispered. Josh's face fell slightly. "I'm already there," Emily finished. "And it terrifies me." Josh's smile could have lit the entire city. "Yeah? Yes. So what do we do now?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "I've never done this before. Tried to love someone while still grieving. Tried to trust someone who left before. I don't know if I'm ready." "Then we figure it out together," Josh said. "No pressure. No timeline. Just us." Emily looked up at him, this man who'd come back into her life like an answered prayer she hadn't known she was praying, and felt something shift in her chest. Not healing, not yet at least. But the beginning of it. The possibility of it. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Let's try. Let's see what happens." Josh kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the moment. Around them, people cheered and music started playing and the new year stretched out ahead of them, full of unknowns. But for the first time in over a year, Emily wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was ready to face it, with Josh by her side. January in Boston was brutal. The holiday decorations came down, the festive atmosphere evaporated, and the city settled into the gray, exhausting reality of deep winter. The streets became treacherous with ice. The cold seeped into your bones and stayed there. Everyone walked around bundled in layers, heads down against the wind, counting the weeks until spring. But Emily barely noticed the cold. Because for the first time since her mother died, she felt warm. Josh didn't just stay, he showed up in ways Emily hadn't known she needed. When she had a panic attack at 2 a.m., overwhelmed by grief that came out of nowhere, Josh answered her call on the first ring and talked her through it until her breathing steadied. When she struggled through her mother's birthday, that first terrible anniversary of a day that used to mean celebration, Josh sat with her in her apartment and looked through photo albums, listening to stories about Margaret Gamble until Emily could smile through her tears. When Emily's apartment had a heating issue and she had to stay somewhere else for 3 days while it was repaired, Helen Callaway insisted she stay in their guest room, and Emily experienced what it felt like to be part of a family again, even if it wasn't her own. Josh introduced her to parts of his new life. She met his business partner, a brilliant woman named Sarah who immediately liked Emily and told Josh he'd better not screw this up. She went to a company event where Josh gave a presentation about ethical investing, and Emily saw firsthand the passion he had for building something meaningful. And slowly, day by day, Emily started to rebuild herself. Not into who she was before. You can't go backward after loss. But into someone new, someone who carried her grief but wasn't consumed by it, someone who could hold both sorrow and joy in the same breath. They made their relationship official in late January. Not with some grand gesture, but with a simple conversation over breakfast at Josh's apartment. "So," Josh said, pouring her more coffee, "my mom asked if you were my girlfriend." Emily smiled. "What did you tell her?" "I said I hoped so, but I wasn't sure if we'd had that conversation yet." "We're having it now? If you want to." Emily set down her coffee cup and reached across the table to take Josh's hand. "I want to," she said. "I'm still figuring out how to do this, how to love someone while still grieving, how to trust again, how to be a person instead of just a functioning disaster. But I want to try. With you." Josh's smile was radiant. "So you're my girlfriend?" "I guess I am." "Can I tell my mom?" Emily laughed. "You can tell your mom." Helen Callaway was predictably overjoyed. She hugged Emily so tight the next time she saw her that Emily couldn't breathe and whispered, "I knew it. I knew you two were meant for this." But not everything was easy. Emily had hard days, days when the grief was overwhelming, when she snapped at Josh for no reason, when she withdrew into herself and couldn't explain why. Josh had his own struggles too. His business faced challenges. There were deals that fell through, clients who left, moments when he doubted whether he'd made the right choice leaving his old firm. But they learned to navigate it together. They learned that love wasn't just the easy moments, the romantic dinners, the sweet texts, the butterfly feelings. Love was also showing up on the hard days, sitting in uncomfortable silence, being patient when your partner couldn't give you what you needed because they were barely holding themselves together. Love was work. But it was work worth doing. In late February, Josh took Emily somewhere she hadn't been since her mother died, her mother's grave. Emily had been avoiding it. Every time she thought about going, panic seized her chest. What would she say? How would she survive standing at the place where her mother's body was buried, knowing Margaret was gone forever? "You don't have to go alone," Josh said gently when Emily finally confessed this fear. "I'll come with you. I'll hold your hand. And if you need to leave after 5 minutes, we'll leave." So on a cold Saturday morning, they drove to the cemetery in Brookline. Emily's hands were shaking so badly Josh had to help her out of the car. They walked through the gates, past rows of headstones, until they reached Margaret Gamble's grave. The headstone was simple. Just her name, her dates, and the words Emily had chosen. "She taught me to notice the good." Emily stood there, staring at those words, and felt like she might shatter. Josh's arm went around her shoulders, steady and solid. "Take your time," he whispered. Emily knelt down in the snow, not caring that her jeans were getting wet, and placed her hand on the cold stone. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come." The words tumbled out then, everything she'd been holding inside for over a year. How angry she'd been. How lost. How the world felt colorless without Margaret in it. How guilty she felt for starting to be happy again, like being happy was a betrayal of her grief. "But I met someone," Emily said, her voice cracking. "Well, re-met someone. Josh Callaway. You never got to meet him, but I think you would have liked him. He's kind, Mom. And he shows up and he makes me want to try again." Behind her, Josh's breath hitched. "I am not okay yet," Emily continued. "I don't know if I'll ever be okay. But I'm trying, I'm practicing what you taught me, noticing the good. And there's good again, Mom. Not the same as before. But different good. New good." Emily sat there for a long time, crying, talking, just being with her mother in the only way she could now. Finally, Josh crouched down beside her. "Want to tell her 3 good things?" he asked gently. Emily looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. Okay. She turned back to the headstone. 3 good things from this week. 1. Helen Callaway taught me her cinnamon roll recipe and I didn't burn them. 2. A little boy at the library told me I was his favorite librarian. And 3. Emily looked at Josh, really looked at him. This man who'd driven her to a cemetery on a Saturday morning, who'd stood in the cold while she fell apart, who loved her enough to help her heal. 3, she said, turning back to her mother's grave. Josh asked me to move in with him and I said yes. Josh had actually asked the night before in his apartment after dinner. I know it's fast, he'd said, nervous in a way Emily rarely saw him. And I'm not trying to rush you into anything. But my lease is up in 2 months and I'm looking at new places and I keep thinking, why get a 1-bedroom when I want you there anyway? Emily had stared at him, her heart racing. You want me to move in with you? Only if you want to. No pressure. We can keep our own places if you need more time. I just thought, we're together almost every night anyway. And maybe it would be nice to make it official? To build something together instead of just bouncing between apartments. Emily had thought about it. Really thought about it. A year ago she would have said no. Would have been too scared, too broken, too closed off to even consider it. But this Emily, the one who'd been learning to live again, to feel again, to trust again, knew what she wanted. Yes, she'd said. I want to move in with you. Josh had literally whooped with joy, picking her up and spinning her around the kitchen. Really? Really? You're not just saying that to make me happy? Josh. Emily had cupped his face in her hands. I'm saying it because it makes me happy. I want to wake up next to you. I want to build a life with you. I want to choose us, every single day. They'd sealed it with a kiss that led to more kisses, and by the time they came up for air, they were already planning what furniture to keep and what to donate, already imagining what their shared space would look like. By March, Emily and Josh had found an apartment in the South End. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a small balcony where you could see a sliver of the Charles River if you leaned out far enough. Helen helped them move in, directing furniture placement and insisting they needed more plants. A home needs life, she declared, placing a potted fern on the windowsill. Plants, pictures, things that make it feel like yours. Emily unpacked boxes of books while Josh assembled furniture. They ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor because they hadn't set up the dining table yet. It was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely perfect. That night, lying in their new bed in their new apartment, Emily turned to Josh. Thank you, she said. For what? For being patient. For showing up. For loving me even when I was too broken to know how to love you back. Josh pulled her closer. You were never too broken. You were healing. There's a difference. I don't know what I did to deserve you. Emily. Josh's voice was serious now. You don't have to deserve love. You just have to be willing to receive it. Emily thought about that, about how her mother used to say the same thing, about how hard it was to let people in when you'd been hurt, about how Josh had proven over and over that he wasn't going anywhere. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. They fell asleep wrapped around each other in their new home, building their new life. Spring came slowly to Boston, then all at once. The snow melted. The trees bloomed. The city shook off its winter coat and remembered how to be beautiful. Emily planted flowers on their balcony, tulips, her mother's favorite. She framed photos of Margaret and placed them throughout the apartment, learning to live with her mother's memory instead of running from it. Josh's business continued to grow. He hired 2 more employees, moved into a bigger office, started getting featured in local business publications. But he never lost sight of what mattered. Every evening he came home to Emily, left work at the office and was present. In April, they started a new tradition. Sunday dinners where they each shared 3 good things from their week, just like Emily used to do with her mother. It became sacred time. No phones, no distractions, just the 2 of them honoring both the small joys and the hard moments. Helen joined them some Sundays, and Emily felt like she was part of a family again. Not her original family, nothing could replace what she'd lost. But a new family built from love and choice and showing up. Emily went back to therapy, something she'd stopped after her mother died. She started processing her grief in healthier ways, learning that healing wasn't linear, that some days would always be hard, but that was okay. She also started writing again, something she'd loved in college but had abandoned years ago. Just small pieces at first. Reflections on grief. Essays about loss and love and finding your way back to yourself. She didn't share them with anyone except Josh, who read every word like it was scripture. You're really talented, he said after reading a particularly raw piece about her mother's last days. It's just therapy on paper. It's more than that. Have you thought about trying to publish these? Emily hadn't. The idea felt too vulnerable, too exposing. But she didn't say no. In early May, Josh came home from work with an unusual expression, excited but nervous. "I need to tell you something," he said. Emily looked up from her book, immediately worried. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's just, I got an offer today, a really good offer." Emily's stomach dropped. "What kind of offer?" "A firm in San Francisco wants to partner with me. It would mean expanding my business to the West Coast, working with major tech companies, potentially tripling our revenue." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. San Francisco. West Coast. All the things that had separated them before. Emily felt ice spreading through her chest. "Are you taking it?" she asked, her voice careful, controlled. "That depends," Josh said, sitting down beside her. "On what?" "On whether you'd consider moving with me." Emily stared at him. "What?" "I'm not taking anything unless we're doing it together," Josh said firmly. "I'm not repeating the same mistake twice. If you want to stay in Boston, we stay. If you're open to trying something new, we go. But we decide together." Emily's mind was racing. Leave Boston? Leave the library, leave Helen, leave her mother's grave, leave everything familiar? A year ago the answer would have been an immediate no. But this Emily, the one who'd learned to build a life after loss, who'd learned that home wasn't a place but a person, this Emily hesitated. "Tell me about the opportunity," she said. They talked for hours. About the business potential, about what life in San Francisco would look like, about whether it was the right move. "What do you want?" Emily finally asked. Josh took her hands. "I want to build a life with you. That's here, great. If it's there, great. If it's on the moon, I'll figure out how to get us there. You're the priority, Em. Not the business, not the money, you." Emily looked at this man who'd learned from his mistakes, who'd proven over and over that he meant what he said, who was offering her a partnership instead of an ultimatum. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need." Emily spent the next week in deep contemplation. She talked to Helen, who told her, "Go. Build your life. Don't let my old bones hold you back. I've got friends here and California has airports." She talked to Marcia at the library, who said, "Honey, you've been playing it safe your whole life. Maybe it's time to take a risk." She visited her mother's grave and sat there for an hour, talking out loud about the decision, wishing desperately for guidance. And then one morning, Emily woke up and knew. She found Josh in the kitchen making coffee. "I have an answer," she said. Josh turned around, trying to hide his nervousness. "Yeah. Let's go to San Francisco." Josh's face lit up. "Really? Really? But on one condition." "Name it." "We come back to Boston for Christmas. Every year. No exceptions." Josh pulled her into his arms. "Deal, absolutely deal." They started planning immediately. Josh accepted the partnership. Emily gave her notice at the library. They packed up their apartment, said goodbye to Helen, who cried but insisted she was happy, and in July, they loaded everything they owned into a moving truck and drove across the country. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the first truly spontaneous thing Emily had ever done. San Francisco was beautiful and overwhelming and nothing like Boston. The hills, the fog, the culture, everything was different. But they built a life there. Emily got a job at the San Francisco Public Library and eventually started submitting her essays to literary magazines. To her shock, they got accepted, published, praised. Josh's business thrived. He hired a full team, opened a second office, became known in tech circles for ethical investing practices. They explored the city together, Golden Gate Park, the Ferry Building, weekend trips to Napa, hiking in Marin. They made new friends, built new traditions. But they never forgot where they came from. Every Christmas they flew back to Boston. They stayed with Helen. They visited Margaret's grave. They read books and ate cinnamon rolls and remembered what mattered. On December 24th, 2 years after they'd reconnected in the library, Josh took Emily to a quiet hill overlooking the San Francisco Bay. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city sparkled below them, lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. "I brought you here for a reason," Josh said. Emily turned to look at him, confused. "What reason?" Josh pulled out his phone and pressed play on a song. Piano music filled the air, soft, classical, achingly beautiful. "This is your mother's favorite song," Josh said. "Helen told me." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "How did you?" "I've been planning this for months." The music swelled and Josh took Emily's hands. 2 years ago, I walked into a library looking for Christmas books and found you instead. And my whole life changed. You changed me, Emily. You taught me what it means to show up. To be present. To love someone fully even when it's hard. He dropped to one knee. Emily gasped, tears already streaming down her face. You've taught me that healing isn't linear, that grief and joy can coexist, that love is worth the risk. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were right to trust me. Right to give me a second chance. Right to build this life with me. Josh pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, with a small diamond that caught the fading sunlight. Emily Gamble, will you marry me? Emily was crying too hard to speak. She nodded, gasping through sobs. Yes. Josh slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. They held each other as the music played, as the sun set, as the city below them came alive with evening lights. I love you, Emily whispered against his chest. I love you too. So much. When they finally pulled apart, Emily looked at her ring, at this physical symbol of promises and futures and second chances. My mom would have loved you, she said. I wish I could have met her. She knew, Emily said with certainty. Somehow she knew you'd come back into my life. She always told me that the universe has timing we don't understand. That sometimes we have to wait for things to be right. She was wise. She was. They sat on that hill until the stars came out, talking about wedding plans and futures and all the good things ahead of them. Emily and Josh got married the following Christmas Eve, in a small ceremony in Boston with Helen and their closest friends. Emily wore her mother's pearl earrings. Josh wore his father's watch, the one thing his father had left behind, the only proof he'd ever existed. Two people who'd been abandoned, who'd known loss, who'd learned the hard way what mattered. Helen officiated, which was technically not legal, but they didn't care. They'd do the paperwork later. This ceremony was about love, not legality. Love is showing up, Helen said to the gathered crowd. That's the secret. Not grand gestures. Not perfect words. Just showing up, day after day, even when it's hard. These two have shown me what that looks like. They've shown each other. And now they're promising to keep showing up for the rest of their lives. Emily and Josh exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Josh promised to never choose work over presents, to come home every night, to love her through the hard days and the easy ones. Emily promised to trust him, to let him in, to build a life that honored both her past and their future. They promised to visit Margaret's grave together every year. They promised to maintain the tradition of 3 good things. They promised to choose each other over and over no matter what came. When they kissed, the room erupted in cheers. And Emily felt her mother there, in the music, in the joy, in the way Helen was crying happy tears. This is the good I notice, Mom, Emily thought. This is the good. 5 years later, Emily and Josh stood in their San Francisco home. A real house now with a yard and space to grow, watching their daughter play with blocks on the living room floor. Margaret Helen Callaway was 3 years old, with Josh's dark eyes and Emily's gentle spirit. 3 good things from today, Josh said, starting their Sunday tradition even though it was Saturday. Maggie looked up. Me first. Okay, baby. Go ahead. 1. Daddy made pancakes. 2. Mommy read me 3 books. 3. Grandma Helen is coming to visit. Josh and Emily laughed. Good ones, Emily said. Daddy? 1. I closed a deal that's going to help fund clean energy research. 2. Maggie said, I love you without us saying it first. And 3. Watching my 2 favorite people exist in the same room. Sappy, Emily teased. Your turn. Emily looked around their home, at the photos on the walls, Margaret, Helen, their wedding, their adventures, at the books overflowing from shelves, at Josh and Maggie sitting in a patch of afternoon sunlight. 1. My essay collection is being published next month. 2. We're all healthy and together. And 3. She paused, her hand going to her stomach where a second child was just beginning to grow, a secret she'd only learned yesterday, a secret she'd been waiting for the right moment to share. 3, Emily said, smiling at Josh. We're going to need a bigger house. Josh's eyes widened. His mouth opened, closed and opened again. You are you? Emily nodded, tears already streaming down her face. We're having another baby. Josh crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Maggie looked up from her blocks, confused but delighted by the sudden emotion. Why are you crying? Their daughter asked. Happy tears, baby, Josh said, his voice thick with emotion. The best kind. That night, after Maggie was asleep, Josh and Emily stood on their balcony overlooking the city, wrapped in a blanket, watching the lights twinkle below. You know what today is? Josh asked. Saturday? It's been exactly 5 years since I walked into that library. Emily leaned into him. 5 years since you asked me about Christmas traditions. 5 years since I found you again. 5 years since I let you back in. They stood in comfortable silence, and Emily thought about everything that had led to this moment. The pain, the loss, the grief that had nearly destroyed her. The broken promises that Josh had learned from. The long, slow journey of healing and trust and choosing each other every single day. "Can I tell you something?" Emily said quietly. "Always. Sometimes I still dream about my mom. And in the dreams, I'm introducing her to you, to Maggie, to this life we've built. And she's so happy, Josh. She's so proud." Josh's arms tightened around her. "She'd be proud of you. Look at everything you've become." "We both became who we needed to be," Emily said. "That's what the pain taught us. That's what the waiting was for." "Do you regret any of it?" Josh asked. "The years we were apart? The pain we went through?" Emily thought about it, really thought about it. "No," she said finally. "Because I don't think we would have worked back then. We were too young, too broken in the wrong ways. We had to fall apart before we could come back together. Fate's timing." Yes, fate's timing. They stood there until the cold drove them inside, and as Emily climbed into bed beside her husband, this man who'd proven over and over that showing up was the greatest form of love, she felt overwhelming gratitude. Not for a perfect life. Not for a life without pain. But for a life built on the other side of loss. A life that honored both grief and joy. A life that understood Christmas could break you and heal you in the same breath. Before she fell asleep, Emily whispered 3 more good things into the darkness. 1. I survived the worst and found the best. 2. I learned that love isn't about perfect timing, it's about being willing to try. And 3. I got to raise a daughter who will never doubt that she's loved, because she's watching her parents choose each other every single day. Josh pulled her closer, kissed her forehead and whispered back, "I love you, Emily Callaway. I love you too." And somewhere, Emily could swear she felt her mother smiling. If this story touched something in you, if you know what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild yourself from scratch, if you've ever wondered whether second chances are real, if you understand that the best love stories aren't about perfect people but about broken people choosing to heal together, then please hit that subscribe button. Because this is what we do here. We tell stories about real people. About loss and love and the messy, beautiful work of being human. About Christmas magic that doesn't look like the movies but feels like coming home. And now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, what's the Christmas you'll never forget? Not the perfect one. The one that changed you. The one that broke you or healed you or taught you something about who you really are. Was it the Christmas you lost someone? The Christmas you fell in love? The Christmas everything fell apart? The Christmas you finally came home? I'll read every single comment. Every story matters. Your story matters. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's grieving, someone who's given up on love, someone who thinks Christmas is just a painful reminder of what they've lost, share this with them. Because here's what Josh and Emily's story teaches us. Christmas can take everything from you. It can shatter your heart into 1,000 pieces. It can remind you of every person you've lost, every dream that died, every promise that was broken. But Christmas can also give you everything back. Not in the same form. Not in the way you expected. But in a way that's real. In a way that's earned. In a way that honors both the pain and the possibility. The magic isn't in pretending the hard stuff didn't happen. The magic is in building something beautiful on the other side of it. So to everyone who's watching this and carrying grief this season, you are not alone. Your pain is valid. And there is still possibility ahead of you even when you can't see it yet. To everyone who's lost faith in love, the right person at the right time showing up in the right way, it's worth the wait. It's worth the risk. It's worth trying again. And to everyone who's just trying to survive this season, notice one good thing today. Just one. And tomorrow notice one more. That's how you rebuild. One moment at a time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your hearts with me in the comments. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. And remember, the best is yet to come. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Keep showing up for the people you love. And keep noticing the good. Subscribe, comment, share this story. And I'll see you in the next one.